My topic today is put the relate back into relationship. Put the relate back into relationship. I find myself often saying we need to put the commune back in communication. There is a way of looking at the world. You know, we refer to that as a worldview. And I think if we're really going to understand this thing called oneness and its implication for our interpersonal relationships, it's going to require that we see our own selves through different eyes. You are not a noun, you are a verb. Just let that sink in for a second. Say to somebody next to you, you're not a noun, you're a verb. Now tell them about yourself with some attitude. I'm not a noun, I'm a verb. This is really, really important. When we think of ourselves as nouns, we think of ourselves as specific entities in the universe. We start to see ourselves as objects that are walking around and moving around in the world, and life is happening to us. Life is happening at us. And when we only see ourselves as nouns, we're too localized. We're not only localized in time and space, but we become localized in all these different kinds of identities, whether they be social-political identities or experiential identities, familial identities. But that's not who we are. That's simply how we are expressing. We are verbs. We are that energetic field. We are the activity of the field itself. Just let the expansiveness of that sink in for a moment. That we are action. Life is not happening to us. Life is happening in us, through us, and most especially as us. We are life in motion. We're life in motion. And it is because we are verbs. It is because we are non-localized. It is because we are part of that cosmic soup. And once again, don't think of the cosmic soup as a noun. And that freaks us out sometimes because we think, well, if there's just oneness and there's not a me anymore and I'm a part of this big amorphous thing, we start to think of like the Borg. And somehow or another, our identity has gotten subsumed like in the Borg. There's this thing that we have to reconcile about this big infinite field. We have to reconcile the fact that it is at once all-encompassing, everywhere present, universal, indivisible, formless, and yet, when it comes into the realm of manifestation, particularly in the manifest material world, it comes through as all kinds of variety and diversity in the particular. So you've got this impartial thing with no form that when it expresses, it takes form, and very specific form, and very diverse form. So at its core, there's no differentiation between it and anything, and yet when it expresses, it never does the exact same thing twice. Ever. No snowflake is alike. No baby fingerprint is exactly alike. It's extraordinary. And I know as a spiritual teacher, this is something that usually boggles the mind when people are trying to figure out, well, how can something that's as big and as expansive as something that can create the universe, how can it have any particular care for me? And my little insignificant baby fingerprint against this entire cosmos? Well, the answer is E. It's all of the above. Just breathe that in for a moment. It's E. It's all of the above. And in order for us to live in this thing called oneness, we have to develop the capacity to be able to see that. Now, it's interesting to me how we understand that in just about everything but people. We can say, well, the great I am, infinite intelligence. It's in the moon and the stars and the wind, and it's in the mountain, and it's in the lily and the redwood, and we don't have a sense that there's really a different life in the redwood than a weed, that it's just a different expression of life, a chihuahua or a whale. We can see, it's just all life, but somehow or another when it comes to people, nope. Your life is somehow really different than my life. Nope. I'm not buying this oneness thing. As this infinite comes into expression, it expresses on these three levels. And I'm going to speak about it now in terms of humanity and people, although we have a relationship to everything, including our own self. At the one level, there's some way in which each and every one of us is like no other person. Well, let me flip it. It'd probably be easier to do it the other way. There's a way in which each and every one of us is like absolutely everybody else in the world. It's our most universal humanity. We all eat and we drink and we bleed and we're birthed and we die and we dance and it's all of our DNA. This similar kind of thing that makes us a species as we are as a species. There's some way in which we're like all people. There's some way in like we're like some people. I tend to refer that as like culture or different kinds of, differences. And then there's some ways in which we are like no other person. We are absolutely unique. Ways we're like everybody, ways we're like some people, and ways in which we are absolutely unique. I have a lifelong social activist background. And what I have noticed, particularly in progressive spiritual communities or communities like this, that are this hybrid of science and spirituality, that we tend to be very comfortable in realms 1 and 3. That we're okay talking about the way in which everybody is part of this big cosmic soup, and there's no differentiation between us, and we're one with the cosmos and everything, part of that infinite potentiality. And there's ways in which we're individualized expressions. We all have our unique patterns and ways of being, but there can be sometimes a little apprehension about talking about the ways in which we're like some people and not other people, as though speaking of difference deters from the oneness. Like, how can you hold those two? If you're talking about difference, aren't you getting away from the oneness? Well, why do you want to do that? Because too many of us associate in the human realm difference with divisiveness. Difference with divisiveness. And we associate oneness with uniformity. But the oneness isn't uniformity. The oneness is unity. But it's unity in the diversity. We get that at every other level. We get how you've got different varieties of dogs. You've got different varieties of cats. You have different varieties of all these other things, and we don't find it threatening. Why we find difference threatening to us on a human level is because we mimic love with emulation. I know you're loved and you're one of us because you act like us. You look like us. You do things like us. So there's this big fear sometimes that if you express in a way that's different than the rest of us, then somehow or another you are threatening the unity. That your lack of uniformity is threatening our unity. Just breathe that in for a second. When we're walking around seeing ourselves as these little entities and life is happening to us, it becomes very difficult for us to be able to see our interconnectedness at the big spiritual level. It becomes really difficult to do that. And we can become so locked in this individual me that in order for me to experience that sense of this sea of oneness, I have to be willing to transcend my own individual identity. The idea of individualism is such a trap. You are not an individual. You are an individualized expression of one thing, but not a separate and unique individual. We are like songs to music. There's a particular song, but the song is not separate from the music. No one song can contain all of music, but all of music can't be contained within one song. So we have this tendency to grab on to people, places, and things as though the all of everything is in it. I gotta hold on to this relationship because if I don't have this relationship, there's no love. I've got to hold on to this job because if there's no this job, there's no prosperity, there's no abundance, there's no success. When we realize that we are the vibration itself, when we realize that we are the activity itself, then we can move up to a place of transcendent and see this collective way in which we're all the same. Now, sometimes we don't want to do that. I don't know if it was last year or the year before. I remember my talk was, well, what if I don't want to be one with them? The inconvenient truth of non-duality. You know, that as much as we talk about a non-dual world, do I really want to be one with you? And because what is that going to say about me? I'm just saying. I'm just saying. There can be no exceptions. There can be no exceptions. If we really, really believe in the oneness, if we really, really, really believe in the non-dual world, there can be no exceptions. I tell my students that are studying with me, they'll be, well, yeah, Reverend Deborah, I get this, blah, blah, but what about whatever? Stop. The moment you say but, you're looking for an exclusion. The moment you say but, you're looking for some reason why someone or something is outside of the whole. Shift your butt to and. Shift your butt to and. It's like, yeah, I hear you. There's such and so and so, and this thing is going on. And how am I supposed to find room in my heart? And, not but. You feel the difference in that? And you want to keep bringing in inclusion and inclusion. And the interesting thing about this vibratory pattern and this being able to rise up is that it also helps us descend down into the forms. When I know that I am a frequency, then I can actually participate in what's going on with you. There doesn't have to be all this othering. When I realize that we're vibrational frequencies, I don't have to exactly be like you to resonate with you, to feel you. And too often we use the excuse of the lack of the similarity of our circumstances as a free pass for me not to see the world through your eyes. As a free pass to not have to go deeper and consider about what's going on in the world and how it might be impacting you. So this tremendous capacity that we have, when we realize that we're verbs, we don't have to get stuck. We don't have to get stuck at all. And that middle tier where it got really juicy in here a couple hours ago. Most of the social justice work is looking in that second tier of the ways in which some of us are like some of us and not necessarily like the others of us. And that's not a bad thing. It rounds it all out because it gives us an opportunity to see the ways in which this variety of expression that's going on has impacted one another. It gives us a chance to see, oh, your reality might be a little different. It reminds me of this joke, this old story about the cactus and the rose that are having an argument. And the cactus is saying to the rose, you drink too much water. And the rose is saying to the cactus, you don't drink enough. My grandmother had this beautiful green thumb. She could make anything grow. She passed it on to her son, but it ended there. My generation didn't get it. But because she had this exquisite love for plants in general, it was no sweat off her back to pay particular attention to what each one needed. See, if you just treat them all the same, then some are going to flourish for whom that environment is most conducive. That's how we are with people. It's like there's certain kinds of environments, for whatever reason, the deck is stacked or it's more conducive to some rather than others. But I don't believe in the plant kingdom they're sweating it. I think in the plant kingdom they're realizing that even in their diversity, they each have a contribution to the whole. None of them are busy trying to protect and hedge their side to make sure that just their kind or just their species gets all the goods. There's a sharing that goes on. There's an openness that goes on. Because at some deep level, they know that they are a part of life itself. So just imagine for a moment how different your life would be if you didn't see yourself as this entity that had to hedge against this thing called life that was indifferent to you. And if you understood that this thing called life wants to be itself in, through, and as you uniquely. See, we don't have our own love. We don't have our own music. We don't have our own creativity. When you love, you are loving with the big love, whatever that is. And when it comes through you, it comes through very specifically as you. But you don't own it. It's not yours. We are all participating and sharing in it. We could all love simultaneously and never use up all the love. We could all be singing around the world simultaneously and not use up music. We can all be to our fullest capacity always, and at our full capacity, not use it all up. Imagine just for a moment if 7 billion people on this planet had the care, the nurturing, the sustenance, the education, the opportunity, the sustainability to be the all that they could be. What kind of world would that be? And I contend we're all a little less off because everybody is not able to be the all that they can be. Yes. When you think about relationships, don't just think about trying to connect with the outer form. Resonate vibrate, synchronize, feel into it, be it. Don't just try to get it. Peace and blessings to you all. Thank you very much.